So for those of you who are unfamiliar with our community conversations, we have been doing them for a number of years now, a decade or more. It's a great opportunity for us to provide information to the community, as well as to get feedback from the community on various topics. So again, I'll be going back and forth briefly because I do recognize that there's some individuals who want to have access to the meet, and so let me admit someone right now. So this meeting is being recorded to ensure that we can share information to our community on some salient topics. We will not address specific personnel or student topics due to confidentiality reasons. We also have key administrators as well as board members on this meet to ensure that we are listening very carefully to the comments and the questions that the community may have. At the end, we'll have a good of the order to address any topics that we may have missed throughout. So on this screen, you see what I would describe as the big rocks or the salient topics we are addressing currently as a school district. I will walk through each topic area, and at the end of each, pause and see if there are any questions or comments that individuals may have. The topics are not in any particular rank order, just simply listed on this slide. One of the major topics that we are addressing, not only we, nationally, globally, and otherwise, surrounding the issue of COVID. Three areas I would like to bring to the attention of the community this morning in terms of what we're doing related to the COVID pandemic. The first one has to do with contact tracing and quarantining. In fact, Mrs. Carmen, who is the school district designee as COVID coordinator, who coordinates very closely with the Saratoga County Department, Public Health Department, she's actually right now on a case texting me back and forth, contact tracing. I bring that to your attention because sometimes people think that we only act on cases during the school day or during the school week. In fact, it is a 7-day, some cases, 15-hour experience or process to ensure that we are digging as deep as we possibly can to understand the implication of a potential COVID case. Recently, the New York State Health Department and subsequently the Saratoga Public Health has adopted a new quarantine period. Originally, it was 14 days. Now it's 10. However, there's a condition related to the 10-day quarantine. For the remaining 14 days, individuals are asked to monitor their symptoms, and in case a COVID symptom were to arise after day 10, to inform us, and we subsequently inform the Public Health Department. And at that point, a determination will be made if a continued quarantine is warranted. The purpose of this is pretty simple. We want to protect our students, our staff, and our community. And so the more we know, the better we're able to be responsible in our actions, and contact tracing is something that we have committed a lot of time as a school district to do and do well. So again, the piece I wanted to recognize for the community is the shift from the 14 to the 10. So I think starting maybe Monday or Tuesday of next week, the self-certification forms will be updated to reflect the 10-day quarantine period. And so a message will be going out to the community discussing or speaking to that issue of the change of the 10-day quarantine. Let me pause for 1 second. I think someone may have also wanted to come in, and Dr. Wood is handling that piece of it as well. The second piece I wanted to bring to the attention of the community is testing. Right now, the school district has in its possession 3,800 testing kits. The testing kits were part of the state's initiative if a school district was in a designated yellow, orange, or red zone. However, the state has seemingly moved away from designations of zones, and currently we are trying to get permission to be able to use those testing kits, which are surveillance testing. They're rapid testing, which is considered surveillance testing. What I mean by that, if someone tests positive, they will be instructed to go to their health provider to have a much more in-depth COVID test. And so we would like to be able to use those 3,800 tests that we currently have in possession and do a community, if you will, screen of tests. And I want to define the community. We, several weeks back, asked for consent of students and staff members to be tested. Right now, we have about 6,000 individuals who have consented to be tested. Consequently, we will use that pool of 6,000 to identify those who we will then schedule for testing. We practiced a week ago using the bus garage bays as a way of doing a drive-through testing, which will be focused primarily on students. As for staff and employees testing, we will try to do that during the course of the school day. So right now we are waiting some approval from the state because we reapplied for a different registration or license, if you will, to do testing. Once that approval is granted, we would look to try to do a massive, if you will, testing, vaccine test, COVID testing in the coming weeks. The third component to COVID testing is vaccination. And we know that it has been a frustration for some to sign up, to the waiting time sometimes when you go to a testing site. And we're working very closely with the Saratoga Public Health to try to identify opportunities for testing and providing that information, particularly to our faculty and staff. And we're also trying to see, once there's a greater availability of vaccine, trying to see if Shenandoah itself can serve as a testing site, not only for the employees of the Shenandoah School District, but also for the Shen community. So again, we are waiting word from the state to see where that may go. But our goal here at Shenandoah is to try to do as much as we possibly can to keep our schools open, to keep our students safe, to keep our faculty and staff safe, and to be a part of the solution to address the issue of COVID. So at this point, I'm going to pause and transition out and see if there are any questions that anyone has related to the COVID topic. Are there any questions related to COVID that our community members would like to ask or comments? If so, just please unmute and. Great.
Hi, Dr. Robinson. Sorry, yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
One question here. I appreciate actually the earlier email you sent out like a couple of weeks ago, informing that actually you didn't find any incident that was actually contracted the virus at school. Do you actually still maintain the same view right now?
Yes, in fact, I spoke to our COVID coordinator, who's Rebecca Corman for the school district. And to date, we were very fortunate. We're very fortunate that to date, we don't have an instance where someone contracted COVID as a result of being present in school. And we were very pleased with that. And I give credit, honestly, I give credit to our students, to our employees who have been following the rules of wearing masks and social distancing. And also to people recognizing that if they have an outside exposure, contacting us right away and letting us know that there's an outside exposure, keeping students home if they're sick, or employees if they're seeing any COVID symptoms. So I think a combination of all those things have right now to date prevented schools from being a source of COVID spread. And that's the reason why every opportunity we get, we try to emphasize those points, particularly when people are exposed. And I'll just give you an example to punctuate a point. Over the holiday break, we had a family went to visit relatives in another state. And as a result, they were exposed to a relative in that state. And they called us right away, asked us what should they do in terms of returning back after the holiday break. And we informed them, one, you need to make sure confirm your testing situation. You need to be tested not only before you get on the plane, but afterwards. And it turned out that 3 of the children in that family were in fact positive as a result of that outside exposure. That family contacting us made a major difference. One, it gave us an opportunity to try to provide educational resources for those students while they're out. And two, it also prevented a further contact tracing, further potential exposure and quarantine of individuals. So I share that just as one example of how we want to encourage families to continue to be partners with us as we battle the COVID issue. And clearly, the vaccine has created a lot of optimism. However, we cannot discount the protocols that we have been following for the last, 10, 8, 12 months since we transitioned into this environment last March. So thank you very much for that question. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you and all the teachers and staff for doing an excellent job. Thank you.
Dr. Robinson, I think your mic's off.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
My apologies for that's the beauty of technology. It allows us to do a lot of things, but there's also always a lot of moving parts. But again, we have to remember it's the purpose of the day. Another big topic I would like to, again, these topics aren't necessarily in any particular priority order, just simply how listed out and how I placed them on the presentation sheet. Another big topic is sports. And some of you may have heard and read in the news today and yesterday afternoon that the governor and the New York State Department of Health has essentially provided the pathway for high-risk sports to start on February 1st. Some of the high-risk sports are basketball, boys and girls basketball, volleyball, football, wrestling. And a lot of excitement around that. And I just read this morning, actually, in the newspaper, a great comment by one of our student athlete, female student athlete, Megan Herter, in terms of the excitement that she as a student athlete had when she heard this news, being a senior and the ability to play. But a piece that actually intrigued me more so was the pledge that she and other student athletes are making to ensure that they will follow the rules, the COVID rules and protocols to protect themselves and others from potential exposure, because they realize that doing so allows them to play the sport that they love in a safe way. So it was great to see our student athletes stepping up to the plate to say, we too will do our part. And so in the coming days, we'll be discussing with the Saratoga County Public Health as well as Albany County and Schenectady County Public Health, because one of the conditions related to the recent allowance from the state was the authorization by the local health departments, which I thought was kind of interesting, because if the state thought that it was appropriate to allow for it, I wasn't sure why the second step was necessary. However, that's not my place to question. It's my place to figure out how we best move forward, recognizing that this is a great opportunity for our students to participate. Many of those students, as you know, last March when we shut down, were unable to do anything at all during the spring, and fall sports was also limited. And here we are in winter, and winter sports is also fairly limited. So this is an opportunity for us to do so. I want to emphasize that we will do so, and we will do so taking all the precautions in place. And again, I'm so pleased that our students themselves have already publicly acknowledged and pledged. There's a pledge going around on social media by student athletes asking their peers to pledge to follow the rules, because they know the importance of adhering to the respective protocols in order to safely have a sports season starting February 1st. So I'm just going to pause and just exit from this screen to see if there are comments or questions that you may have as members of the community. Any questions or comments? More information to come related to this. Mr. Colin, who is our athletic director, he's actually on a meet today with colleagues across the state, trying to ensure that there's consistency in protocols being practiced. Recognize that we do play sports against teams from largely in the capital region, but potentially outside of the capital region. So we want to make sure that every school is being consistent with the respective practices. So let me transition to the next topic. So a big issue, a big topic area that as a school district we are addressing is the budget itself. This past week, the governor issued what we refer to as the governor's budget, but it's the executive budget. It's the first indication of what we may be dealing with in terms of planning for the 21-22 school year budget. And here at Shen, for us, we go even beyond that point. Not only do we look at planning for the next year's budget, we look at the next 2 years beyond that point, recognizing that what we do right now in the current school year is going to impact next school year's budget, and how we plan for next school year's budget is going to impact the year after. And so the governor's executive budget, and on Tuesday, I would encourage community members to chime into the Board of Education meeting. We'll be having a little bit more extensive detail than conversation that we're having right now related to the executive budget. The executive budget, for the most part, holds school districts across the state harmless to the 2019-2020 foundation aid level. And that's a key point. It's holding school district harmless to 2 years back. The reality of it is costs have increased every year since 2019-2020. And so while it says hold harmless, the reality of it is school districts have to make some adjustments because of cost increases, because of different demands. We have expended millions of dollars this year on pandemic-related items that we did not anticipate, could not have anticipated spending on, because we didn't know the realities of COVID when we were planning this budget last February. And so I point that out because as we move forward in planning for 21-22, we have to keep those things in mind, and keep in mind that the current executive budget is based upon 2019-2020 school year foundation aid. So it's problematic in some sense. However, this is not a complaint. It's a recognition that we have to plan for some adjustments as we move forward. The second key point to the budget dilemma that we're contending with is the tremendous reliance on federal stimulus dollars. New York State back in December received a significant amount of dollars. A lot of it was actually earmarked to address the needs of school. And the budget proposal from the governor for 21-22 essentially used all those dollars to fill the gap from the state perspective. So in other words, in the projection from the governor's budget, about $9 million, which is a significant amount, the gap of $9 million is being covered by federal dollars. That in itself, yes, we don't have to necessarily plan for a potential reduction of $9 million in 21-22. However, it then leads to the fear of a funding cliff. What do I mean by that? If after the 21-22 school year, next school year, the federal dollars aren't available, the question then becomes, how does the state backfill, in the case of Shenandoah, that $9 million gap? And if the funds aren't available, what does that mean? There's a potential that for 22-23, we could again be facing the potential of a significant budget gap. And that's why I made the point that as we plan our budget, we not only look to the coming year, we look to 2 years beyond that point and try to see and identify what contingencies we can put in place. So essentially, we could try to control our destiny as much as possible. And right now, a part of that control is what will happen in 22-23 with that $9 million gap for Shenandoah that is right now being proposed to be filled with federal stimulus dollars. There's also a lot of talk at the federal level of a second stimulus that will provide some additional resources to the state. So my thought and hope, prayer, and wish, to be quite frank with you, is that the state will be very strategic and look also 2-3 years in the future to avoid a funding cliff when those federal dollars dry up, and have a process in place to essentially wean the state off the federal funds and back into a situation we hope where the economy is robust 2-3 years from now, that the state coffers will be filled. And so we'll no longer have a reliance, or should I say, such a strong reliance on federal funds. So that's a concern that we have. Yes, we're optimistic about going into the next school year and providing a high quality experience for our students. However, we are very also cautious about our planning process, recognizing the sources of our revenues and not being overly ambitious to think that everything is back to norm, and consequently, or should I say subsequently, having some contingencies in mind if we have to encounter a loss in state revenues some point in the future. So a major piece is for us, and more of this conversation will happen over the course of the next several weeks as we have budget development conversation at the Board of Education table. So again, I would ask the community to stay tuned and pay attention to those conversations. And we will be providing information via our newsletter, via SIS messages, via website, to ensure that the community is informed of how the budget, the state budget, the federal budget plays out for the Shenandoah Central School District. And one other point before I transition to see if there are any questions or comments related to budget is we're also, as a part of the May referendum, we will have a capital project, a $26 million capital project, relatively small in comparison to some recent projects by some surrounding school districts that have gone into the hundreds of millions of dollars. The tact there, or should I say the strategy that we use here at Shenandoah, we don't wait to do what I call these mega projects. We try to do things as we go along to keep our facilities at top shape and to ensure that we are maximizing our revenue resources as much as possible. And what I mean by that, right now, we're able to borrow funds at very low level. And so consequently, we look to pay off debt. And as we pay off one debt, we bring in a debt. Perfect example, I think about this is happening in my household right now. My wife's car payment my wife's car is paid off. My daughter is chomping at the bits for a new car. So if we were to purchase a new car for her, the payment would be less than what my wife was paying for her payment. But from a household budget, it would be essentially a net zero impact. And we try to have that same approach as a school district. When we pay off one debt, bring another debt, so it's a net zero impact on our taxpayers. And so we're looking forward to this capital project that will address some needs at the elementary and middle school level, as well as some of our athletic needs. People are extremely proud of our athletic facilities, particularly the turf field. However, the turf field is now 13 years old and the useful life is 15. So we're gearing up for the possibility of looking to replace that as well, the turf and the track surface. So believe it or not, has been that long, time quickly flies by. So that capital project is something that we're pretty excited about because again, it gives us a chance to ensure that our facilities are up to par and meeting the needs of our students. I will again pause and transition to see if there are any questions anyone have related to the budget, the capital project, or otherwise. Do you have any questions or comments from anyone on the call?
Yes, Dr. Robinson, I had a question regarding the budget, and is there any expected deficit in it regarding children with in the special education program?
Thank you very much for that question. So the short answer and the only answer is no. And I appreciate that question because unfortunately sometimes when people are pressed to make fiscal decisions, some of the decisions they make are not necessarily in the best interest of every student. And the key word to that is every student. Contrary, and I think our track record over the past, and again, I can only speak for my time here, 16 years, and the Board of Education commitment to every student has been very true. And so we look first to make decisions that will provide the best opportunities for our students, and certainly our special education students are one of the priority areas. One of the tenets of our process is service follow needs. And so we try to identify those needs very carefully and try to provide those services appropriately to meet the respective needs of our students. And so we know no plans at all to address any reduction in services to our special education population. And frankly, at this point, no plans at all to make any reduction in services to any of our students. And we don't apologize as a school system to try to work hard to meet the needs of our students as much as we possibly can. So I really appreciate that question, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions we have related to the budget or the capital project initiative that I just recently outlined? So with that being said, again, I'm going to transition back to the presentation mode and go to the next topic. And after that topic, if there are questions related to that, we could certainly address those things. So the next topic area is one that right now, of all the topic areas that are listed here, that I have the least amount of information on. It relates to the New York State exam. In fact, yesterday I was on a statewide meeting with various members of the state education department as well as the interim commissioner. And these two topic areas were the ones I think that consume most of the time and thought. And the first one is the 3-8 testing, and the CBT is computer-based testing related to 3-8. As some of you may know, and some may not, 3-8 testing in the state of New York is regulated by the federal government. And right now, with the transition to a new Secretary of Education, who was the former Commissioner of Education from Connecticut, there is anticipation that some point next week, this coming week, that the federal government will make some announcements related to 3-8 testing. Once that occurs at the Department of Education at the federal level, the New York State Education Department will then make those determinations. It's not a decision to be made by the New York State Education Department. It's a federal mandate. And we are waiting to see if the U.S. Department of Education will essentially say for this year, we'll be waiving 3-8 testing. I, for one, hope they do so because of the uneven nature by which education is being delivered across the state. What I mean by that, we have school districts right now that are having kids return to school for the first time this past week. We have school districts that have attempted to provide students a virtual learning experience, and many of those students have not been able to access consistently the educational programming. So subsequently, that lends to a very uneven delivery of instruction across the state. Even here in Shenandoah School District, we have some families, because of various reasons, are not as consistent with accessing, particularly in the virtual environment. And so we don't want the 3-8 testing to be something that reflect those who have or those who don't have, versus truly an indication of where students are. Related to that is a computer-based testing sequence of it. Right now, the current edict is that every student would have to come in person to be tested, which is clearly problematic because we have about 20% of our student population that are accessing education virtually. So we'll see what the next week or so brings in terms of 3-8 testing. In the meantime, as a school district, we will continue to make the preparations for 3-8 testing and see, again, we'll rather be prepared and don't have to execute than to be called on to execute and not prepared to do so. So we're still very much going through the same processes to prepare for 3-8 testing as we have in past years, but we are awaiting the words from the U.S. Department of Education, and subsequently after that, the New York State Education Department. So more to come related to 338 testing. The second big question that's being asked related to the June Regents exams. Last June, the Board of Regents waived those Regents exams. There's a lot of conversations right now of the potential of Regents exams also being waived for June. Again, based upon the call yesterday, not committing the State Education Department to anything, we're anticipating that possibly maybe mid-February, there will be further clarification related to June Regents exams in terms of, are we having them? If we have them, what are the dates and of those assessments as we move forward? Similarly to the 338 testing, we continue as a school district to prepare our students as much as possible to be ready to master those exams if they are in fact offered in June. But those are two big areas that right now we're watching very closely to see how that plays out at the federal level and again at the state level. I'm going to pause here briefly, stop sharing, and see if there are questions that you may have as community members. Do we have any questions related to testing at all? And more information will come. One of the things that I think we're very good at as a school system is communicating expediently with our community. And we try to communicate facts. We try to get away from communicating presumptions and try to communicate facts because we don't want people to be misinformed. And so when we get facts on matters, we try to put it out there to our community as a part of our partnership, to ensure that families are aware of what may be happening with their students, and for us to also effectively plan forward. So 338 testing and the Regents exams are major components of our system, and we will continue to monitor and even advocate that the right things occur, not only for students here at Shenandoah, but for students across the state. We recognize that many students are not as fortunate as some of our students here at Shenandoah, and we want all students to have the best opportunity to demonstrate their knowledge and not necessarily have a test reflecting the difficulties that they've had accessing education, educational resources. So let me transition again to the next topic area. So as we plan ahead, there are many things that we're looking at. Right now, our current scheduling model for grade 6 is somewhat similar to the K-5 model. And we have a hybrid model for grade 7-12 that the block schedule is the major part of that. As we plan ahead for grade 6-12, we'll be looking to continue with our block schedule model. Yes, there'll be fine tuning of that model. Yes, we will look to tap into the lessons learned, good, bad, or otherwise, from this past year. Yes, we will seek input from our teachers and others who are intimately engaged in that process, and even at the high school level, student input to ensure that we truly do understand the benefits and also identify areas that we can fine tune. So ensuring that September 2021 is a much better schedule than it was in September 2020. So lessons learned and best practices from this past year will be applied as we move forward. A lot of detailed planning related to that. I simply put it out there now to the community so people know that we are right now in January engaged in that type of detailed planning for September. Even graduation. As we sit, we were listening very closely. I certainly was listening very closely to a press conference by the governor last week. At that press conference, he announced the potential of opening concert venues such as SPAC in Saratoga using various testing protocols. To me, that was a very positive sign that the potential exists that we could have graduation at SPAC. It's not a given. I don't want anyone to run and say, Dr. Robinson said, I'm simply stating that it certainly created a lot of enthusiasm and optimism that we could actually have something that resembles graduation in the past at SPAC. So we will continue to look at that piece of it. We certainly know, and kudos to Mr. Agustinoni and the high school administration and staff that put together what I think is probably one of the most profound and touching experience I've had as an administrator last year's drive-through quote unquote graduation. We certainly have the template for that. That was a lot of work, a lot of moving parts, no pun intended, with a lot of people driving in. And we are looking at the potential. If we are allowed to have graduation at SPAC, we will look to do so. And we will look to continue to take advantage of the live streaming component of it. And just a little anecdotal piece of information to highlight that point. After graduation last year, I was walking actually through my neighborhood, and a gentleman stopped me and said, "Wow, thank you for the live streaming of the graduation ceremony," because they had relatives on the West Coast who were unable to come to the graduation, but they experienced it live with their family members, and they were able to record it and share it and discuss it beyond the graduation day. So we're looking forward to taking advantage of that technology again, regardless if we're doing a drive-through type graduation or some type of hybrid graduation at SPAC or a full-blown experience. Depends on where we are with vaccination, where we are with COVID. Again, I'm not naive to think that in June we will still have issues of COVID. I'm not naive to think that at all. I'm optimistic that we will work hard to put as many protocols as we can in place to ensure a quality experience that our graduates deserve. The same type of time and attention that we put into graduation for the class of 2020, we will put into graduation for the class of 2021. So I just want to put that out there for parents to know that those thoughts are clearly on our agenda and our horizon right now, and we're planning forward those things. Even things like next month, we have February break and spring break. Those breaks are still on our calendars. Granted, people may not be traveling as much. And as we move closer to that, we hope again with more vaccination that the COVID trend line will be decreasing significantly. So those breaks won't contribute to future spikes. So we'll be monitoring those situations very closely as we move towards those break weeks. But again, I want to make sure that people know that we're being forward thinking in our planning efforts and thinking from the perspective of how do we take advantage of opportunities to provide our students, in this case of graduation, of the dignity and the type of ceremony that we know our students deserve in terms of educational experience for the 21-22 school year, a high quality experience taking advantage of the lessons learned from this current school year. So I'm going to pause briefly here again to see if there are comments that you may have as community members related to planning ahead. Any questions, thoughts, comments? Thank you. I appreciate that. And again, stay tuned. Stay tuned. All these are forward-thinking areas that we're focused on. And I think it's important for people to know that, because oftentimes people feel as if things just happen. Nothing just happens. Everything is a result of a lot of thought, a lot of planning. And so hopefully that people appreciate that. So when we encounter those experiences, there's truly appreciation of the larger context and the work that went into making those experiences relatively seamless for all. So again, kudos to a lot of our administrative folks and a lot of our teachers and staff who are engaged in that planning right now as we speak. So again, let me just transition to and address the last topic area, and then we'll turn it over to a good of the order before we transition for today's session. So the last session actually has to do, or should I say last topic, has to do with the Board of Education. We were, and still, I could personally say it, distressed, if you will, hurt, saddened by the loss of Gary DeLallo, who I saw as a mentor, who was the board president that recruited me to come to Shenandoah. And Bill Casey, shortly after that, became the board president when I was appointed to be the superintendent of Shenandoah. So I have a tremendous debt of gratitude to Mr. DeLallo. God bless his soul. So we're in the process of filling his vacant seat, which will have 1 year left on his term. We also were informed last week by Mrs. Rajat that due to various family circumstances, she'll be stepping down from the board. Mrs. Rajat also served as the vice president of the board, so the board will also have to fill that position. Mrs. Rajat was a major contributor to the Board of Education, as well as a PTA. She is someone who saw service to the community as not robbery versus service to the community as a privilege. And so I'd like to thank Mrs. Rajat for her tremendous service. And the board is going through a process right now to fill those 2 vacant positions. We have initially was 14 individuals expressed an interest for the board. 1 person withdrew, and 1 person did not submit the screening questions by the deadline. So on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, the Board of Education in executive session will, under the guidance of the district clerk, Kathy Chase, will receive the responses from the 12 individuals. The board, it will individually read those responses, engage in a rating process that we have refined over the years, and make a determination as to how many of the 12 of those individuals will be interviewed on February 3rd, 2nd or 3rd. I will confirm that date for a position to fill the vacant position of Mr. DeLallo and Mrs. Rajat. That date is February 2nd. So again, the process to fill those 2 vacant positions is taking place. And we look forward to having 2 new colleagues on the board. Those individuals who are selected to fill those positions will have to run for re-election in May if they so choose, as well as anyone else for that matter who choose to run for a board seat in May. We'll also have in May the position for Mr. Presley, who will be running for re-election on the board as well. So there'll be 3 board positions open. 1, the incumbent position held by Mr. Presley, a 3-year term. 1, the second, a 3-year term, which is a result of Mrs. Rajat's position, because if she would have remained on the board, she also would have had been running for re-election. And then the 3rd is the 1-year term remaining from Mr. DeLallo. So the Board of Education is going through that process now, and we're looking to fill the 2 vacant positions. Ideally, by the February 9th board meeting, the interviews will be on February 2nd, and then the next business meeting of the board is on February 9th. So that the appointments and the oath of office will be given to those 2 individuals at that meeting. The board officer position, the board will be discussing that on this Tuesday and making a determination in terms of who will serve the vice president role for the remainder of this school year until the reorganizational meeting in July. So again, that's an update on in terms of what's happening with the Board of Education. Certainly the Board of Education members represent the voice, the varied voice of this community. And I'm privileged as superintendent to have a very strong and committed Board of Education that's committed to the best interests of students, that allows us as administrators to move forward with exciting and innovative opportunities to educate our students. And so the filling of these 2 positions will be critical to the continued focus as a board. When I transition out to see if there are any questions, I'm going to ask Mrs. Deanna Stevenson, I know she was on the call earlier, if she could just offer a few comments on behalf of the Board of Education. So let me exit here and go back to, again, where I can engage with all of you in the meet. Mrs. Stevenson, do you have any comments?
Can you hear me, Dr. Robinson?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Oh, great. Well, as we continue on into this year, it's been obviously a year like no other. Dr. Robinson has done a great job this morning in outlining what we have done together as a community and the leadership here at Shen. We continue to look forward to some positive news regarding the pandemic. Shenendehowa has certainly been a best in class in keeping our students safe, in acknowledging when there was a positive case, and moving into spring as a possible, maybe we're even working on as a possible vaccination site. I know Dr. Robinson and his team is trying to do that, as well as if we need to pivot and test very quickly, we can accommodate that. It has been a sad year. We've lost two of our colleagues that, like Dr. Robinson has said, has been very committed to this board for years. So we look forward to bringing on two new colleagues in the coming weeks, and moving through this year. And again, committed to the excellence that we do here at Shenendehowa. So glad to see sports coming alive again. As a mom of a senior athlete myself, so very, very excited to see those kids be able to play and enjoy the sports that they love. So looking forward to the next couple of months, the warm weather, and continuing to do the great job that we do at Shen.
Thank you, Mrs. Stevenson. I just wanted to address one comment that came into the chat, a question about the possibility of this school year expanding more school options. I would love if, quite frankly with you, the vaccine process is expedited much faster and more people are vaccinated and we reach a point of herd immunity by spring, so that social distancing requirements will shift to allow for more students in person. However, until those declarations are made, our plan is to continue for the remainder of the school year as is. However, again, I want to emphasize that we don't apologize for taking advantage of providing more for our students. And sometimes I admit I get heat for that because sometimes people see that as us just being too bold. But I think when we're thinking about the education of our students, our kids don't get a redo. They don't get a do-over. And so we have to try to provide to them as much as we possibly can when we have them here. So we'll see what the next several weeks and months bring. For that, and certainly we are planning and hoping that September 2021 will be significantly different in terms of the start of school than September 2020. So I really appreciate that comment in the chat. Just one last comment, just to see if there are any other things for the good of the order. I recently I spend way too much of my time seemingly on calls. I sit on a national committee of superintendents across the state. And we were fortunate to have someone from the CDC on that call under the new administration. And one of the major topics is, will there be changes in contact tracing and initiatives from the CDC? As you know, the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, their edicts, if you will, dictate often what states do in terms of the 6 feet, mask wearing, and things of that nature. There's a lot of optimism that they'll be reviewing that based upon data points, based upon what they see in terms of COVID spread in schools or other places where people have congregated in large amounts, and making some determinations in terms of if or when some of those protocols may change. So we're engaged in those conversations. I often say we, because I don't take credit for anything myself, because everything that we do as a collective unit here at Shenendehowa. But we're certainly trying to be a part of those conversations, to understand those conversations, and to try to influence some of those determinations as much as we possibly can, versus simply reacting to them after the fact. So we're excited to see the potential of the CDC engaging in direct conversation with school officials. We're looking to have the new Secretary of Education on this call in the coming weeks to get his direct thoughts on not only COVID, but the topic areas that we just mentioned in terms of 3-to-8 testing and things of that nature. So we're working as much as we can to try to influence those who influence decisions and move forward. So that's where we are with some of those type things. I'm just going to read a comment in the chat. We say vaccines. Are we talking about teachers and staff? So great question, and I appreciate a person for that clarification. Right now, the vaccine that are both the two that are out there and prevalent, the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine, are largely for adults. Some, when I say adults, age 18 and older. There is some talk that potentially one of them could go as low as age 16. But again, don't take me for that piece of it. Right now, the standard is age 18 or higher. So therefore, it's adult based. There's a lot of testing that's taking place right now. And again, I'm going back to the call I referenced to try to identify vaccines that will work for students. And so we're looking forward to that next wave of vaccine capacity in terms of vaccine for children. So I think that's the next wave to come as people study. Clearly, the new strands of the vaccine is also a major point of focus for the CDC and all those really, really smart people who are researching how to put together vaccines to make sure that what's out there is effective. Again, I just read even locally here, we have Regeneron, a company here in East Greenbush, who has been a major player in vaccine development. They're also looking at some vaccines that will not only address the various strands, but address the larger population as a whole. So there's a lot of optimism on the part of many, and there's a steadfast focus on those in the science field to try to bring forth solutions. And again, we as a school community, we embrace the possibilities that vaccination brings. I was actually scheduled myself for a vaccine, and ironically, I happened to call the place to make sure I was still on, and they told me, "Oh, sorry, you got bumped." And I was like, "No." So I'm going to try to reschedule again at some point in the future when more vaccine opportunities come open to ensure that I'm in line to do so as well. We have many of our folks who have received the first vaccine and are waiting, scheduling for the second. And we as a school community, as again, I pointed out, we continue to try to push to see what we can try to influence in terms of availability of vaccines as we move forward. Any other thoughts, comments from anyone on this call? So I'm assuming that the topic areas were the topic areas of concern that people had. And I hope they are, because honestly, those are the major big rocks that we are contending with as a school system. And again, it's so important for you as community members, as staff members who are on this call, hear and understand, have the bigger context. And I think the context is so important for people to have, and realize that nothing we do is in isolation, and everything that we do comes from a very systemic approach. We're trying to figure out, if we do this thing, what's the implication for the next thing, and plan accordingly. So we can anticipate positive outcomes and not hoping for positive outcomes. And that's not semantics when I use the word anticipate versus hoping for. We plan for positive outcomes in mind and work backwards. We say we want this to be our achieved goal, and subsequently we ask the question, then what do we need to do to achieve that goal, and then build forward again. A future present perspective in our thinking and our planning. So those are the big rocks that we have as a school community, and we embrace the challenges that comes about as a result of COVID. And we also look at the various solutions that are being offered and trying to figure out how we can continue to be a part of the solution making around these major issues. And these are major issues. These are often issues that are first-time issues that organizations are dealing with. And Mrs. Stevenson's comment was, I think, was most appropriate in the sense that we are partnering with those to move forward. And I want to say kudos again to the Board of Education. The Board of Education has been a tremendous partner with all the topics that we mentioned as we move forward to try to ensure that here at Shenandoah we provide a quality experience for our students, but also influence what's happening across the state. I take it as a part of my professional obligation to also try to support my colleagues across the state, because I take it personally that every young person, regardless where they live, they should have the opportunity to be afforded a high quality education. And so if I could do that, that's a role that we should do. And I appreciate this community have been very supportive of our leadership over the last several years and the challenges that we have faced with the pandemic as we move forward. So we're optimistic about the future. We're focused on the safety of our students, and we will continue to try to tap into opportunities to do more for our students versus doing less. So any final thoughts, comments? Yes, we were scheduled to go to 11, but I will not have a 30-minute pregnant pause in the presentation, because we do recognize that, like all of you, Saturday mornings are cherished periods of time where you try to catch up on all the things that you can potentially do during the week. And so I respect your time for joining us this morning for this community conversation. And I would say that if there are topic areas that are issues that come up that you have questions about, if you're a parent in the school district, reach out to your child's principal. My administrative colleagues are well versed in the topic areas, and if they're not, they're not too humble to say, hey, let me get an answer for you. So we want to be partners with our community, we want to be partners with our parents. So feel free to reach out. Reach out to my office, reach out to Dr. Wood. I share that with you because I think that's been the secret of our success as a school community, that people feel as if they're knowledgeable about what's happening. Yes, sometimes people want to be right in the decision making, and the reality of it, sometimes that may not be the case, but we want people to be informed and understand why we're doing what we're doing, so they could appreciate how we get things done, and subsequently we can then applaud when we have success with our respective endeavors, and come together when we're challenged to do things differently as we move forward. So it's important to us, and I appreciate you joining us this morning. And again, I'm just going to pause to see if there are any last minute comments that anyone would like to make. Seeing none, hearing none. Dr. Wood, any comment you would like to make on, as well as the Deputy Superintendent?
No, I would just say it's great to see so many folks coming out this morning. We appreciate people taking the time and their interest in staying abreast on what we're doing in the school system. And to the comments that we heard earlier about wondering when we're back fully in session, we very much look forward to it. Look forward to that opportunity, and glad that we're able to do as much as we are right now, even with the social distancing.
So again, thank you all, sincerely, thank you. And I have to emphasize that point, and just take one little personal piece of it. I was talking to a colleague last night, actually, and you know, sometimes you need colleagues to commiserate with, right? Because at the end of the week, you have so many things like, oh my God, is there anyone you could talk to? And you don't want to bring it home because you don't want to drop your dramas on your family. And so I reached out to a colleague on the drive home, and we were just commiserating a little bit. And you know, this that fine line between, oh my God, you know, how much more of this can we all shoulder? And then that same notion, because there's so much that we need to shoulder, that's the reason why we have to stand strong and move forward. And I said to my colleague that, you know, we have all the same issues that everyone is dealing with. But the one thing I think I could bank on most times, and I'm not going to say all the time, because I do have some people who vehemently protest to me and my approaches, and that's a part of the process, because you need to have dissenting opinions in order to have consenting opinions. However, I said to him that, you know, I'm so fortunate that by and large, this school community value and appreciate what we are doing as educators. And that statement is a significant statement, because there are some places that people, I'm not sure, understand and appreciate the essential nature of a quality education for our students. And so I'm not saying this to to ask for favor from our community because I've been here long enough now. This is year 16 but I'm saying to acknowledge the community, to say that your role is so critical for us to stay true to our mission of providing education for our kids in an environment where every young person feel welcome, every young person feel empowered, every young person feel as if an adult has their best interest in mind. That's our goal. That's our goal for every young person that walks through our doors that we call Shenandoah. So I want to end by simply saying thank you as community members. Thank you as Board of Education, who are community members who committed the time to be on the board. Thank you as administrative and staff and faculty colleagues for your commitment to our students during these most challenging times. Shen is in. Shen is in, and we're in it together. And regardless of the challenge, folks, we're going to embrace the challenge and move forward. That's my commitment. That's our commitment to this community. And it has been our commitment, and we'll continue with that commitment forward. So I want to say thank you for joining us this morning and looking forward to future conversations. So thank you very much.